read that really lifts the veil off domestic abuse, the power of a collaboration between therapist Sue Hickey and a courageous survivor of abuse, Philipa Sklaar, teaches more than just about why, but how, I should say more about self-love and the powerful tool of survival. Both women co-wrote the book. They join me now in studio. Ladies, thank you very much for joining me, and happy Women's Day to you. Just very quickly, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the conversation, what does this day personally mean to you, Philipa and Sue?
It means that women have choices. Women must always remember we have choices. And one of the marvelous choices is that all women should own a sacred no.
Oh, that's powerful. Sue?
Thank you. Well, we decided to launch the book around Women's Day because it really was our celebration on how women empower themselves. That's what we deal with in our book, is that we talk about women getting better in one form or another. So that's what Women's Day means to me.
And you know, let's talk about this book, because Philipa, your story is one of many, but you've chose to be very courageous about it, to put pen to paper, to collaborate with Sue on something that in one way or another touches people on a profound level, because it does lift the veil of how we perceive, or the perception about domestic abuse.
Well, definitely, that's one of the reasons why it took me so long to accept that I was an abused woman. I arrogantly and stupidly used to think that women who are abused were uneducated, illiterate, that their abusers were thugs, were kind of neo-Nazis. It never dawned on me that an abuser could be a sophisticated CEO of a company who was educated and affluent. So abuse actually is a great leveler. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, how much money you earn, what your intellectual abilities are. It happens to all women.
So you're a trained therapist. You deal with women from all walks of life, and it's amazing what Philipa is saying. Why do we have this massive misconception about the form of domestic abuse? That we have a preconceived idea. Where does it come from?
Well, I'm really glad you raised that, because one of the biggest issues for me is that people still link abuse to violence. What our book says is that abuse is emotional and psychological as well as violent. And it's interesting that most people, as soon as we use the word abuse, will start telling violent stories.
Okay.
And women need to understand, and the whole of society needs to understand, that abuse is emotional. But for me, one of the biggest myth busters in this book is that I believe that women have been allowed to feel like they were victims of abuse. And this book asks women to take responsibility for the fact that they weren't simply chosen, they chose him as well. They were in this relationship because of their own pathologies, and we're not trying to blame them. What we're trying to say is that you are the solution. You're not the victim. You can change yourself in order to change your life.
You know, this is such a very different and almost a very refreshing conversation, because, and this leads to my next question. I wanted to talk about this self-awareness of compassion and having this tough love for yourself. But did you know that your partner, did he show those signs? At what point did it dawn on you that you were in an abusive relationship, Philipa?
Well, part of the profile of being an abused woman is that we live in total denial. We lie to ourselves. We lie about our behavior. We lie about his behavior. So what we've actually found is that every single woman who has been abused can actually pinpoint an incident before they actually married them. I was in this abusive relationship for 7 years before it actually dawned on me, and I accepted the fact that I was an abused woman. And that's the syndrome and the difficulty and the complexity of what it means to be an abused woman. And once I got it, I then realized that I was to blame in so many ways, because I taught him that it was okay to abuse me by always forgiving him and accepting his lies and apologies and always going back.
So here's the interesting thing I wanna ask you. We, and I kept talking about we because I think in this conversation I represent the public. We have this perception that women have the choice to leave, and in the book you're talking about women being trapped.
Absolutely. You see, I believe that society thinks that they say no to abuse. But there's an underlying attitude, and that's first time a victim, second time a volunteer. It's not true. Many women cannot leave. First of all, they can't leave because financially it's very difficult for them to leave. And second of all, leaving is not necessarily the right thing to do. One of the reasons that Philipa and I wrote this together is Phil has been in 3 abusive relationships. She left and repeated the pattern because she hadn't understood herself or the problem. The other thing is that women they need to take care of their children. Leaving often means compromising the children. Yeah. Now, I accept that if you're in a violent relationship, you absolutely need to leave. If you're in an emotionally abusive relationship, you have options. That's what this book tells women. You have options to manage yourself and the relationship, and then to heal yourself. Because unless you start to take ownership of this problem, the chances are you won't do better next time.
For sure. Guys, we've run out of time, but this is a very fascinating
Thank you very
conversation.
much.
It's called When Loving Him Hurts. It's available at all good bookstores. Co-written by therapist Sue Hickey and a hero, Philipa Sklaar. And they've put some amazing tips together for people, for women that have survived abuse. Okay, it is our Women's Day celebration, and we're coming from the Free State. Let's go back to Peleza, who's doing the job for us on the ground.